Hey, sorry I haven't uploaded in a while. I'm in my final year of uni, so that's taken up basically all of my free time lately. I promise I haven't forgotten about the channel, and there is some good things in the works, so keep an eye out. Thank you for your patience, and on to the video. Every gamer has a backlog, and while I'm certain that you, dear viewer, have been making great progress and are staying disciplined in shrinking it, I come to you today to recommend some games that I think you should add to your backlog, if you haven't played them already. The criteria I use for selecting titles for this algorithm-friendly numbered list is twofold. I picked games that I often think about replaying. Each of these are games that I've played and finished, and they've left enough of an impact with me that I feel the desire to replay them while trying to actually play through some of the games on my backlog. I've attempted to avoid the biggest titles out there, so no Baldur's Gate 3s or Elden Rings. Those are high profile enough that you really should have played them by now. And if you haven't, seriously play those too, they're so good. That said, I'd be lying if I claimed every game on this list is some ultra obscure hidden gem. I think these games are underappreciated, and while I bet there's a pretty good chance you haven't played at least one of them, I wouldn't be surprised if a few of you have already played them all. If that's you, thanks for watching anyway. Hope you get something out of the video regardless, and get back to your backlog. Before we get into the list though, I'd like to throw out some honourable mentions. Each of these games is maybe a little too well known for what I'm going for here, but they're still absolutely worth your time if you haven't played them. These are iconic PlayStation classics. They even had a whole Astrobot level inspired by them, and deservedly so. But even among retro PlayStation fans, a shocking number haven't actually played these games. I was among that number until a few years ago, and it was long overdue. Both games are weird, surprisingly unique platformers that hold up remarkably well. It's hard to pick one of the two to recommend. 2 is maybe a bit more ambitious and polished by virtue of being a generation later, though the first is incredibly charming and has this way of making you feel nostalgic, even if it's your first time playing. Honestly, they're short, super memorable, and just plain old monkey catching fun. There's really no excuse not to play both, as long as you can look past the slightly dodgy emulation on the PS Classics version of Ape Escape 2. From Software's 2023 mech game was critically acclaimed, and coming from a developer of that size, it would by definition get some attention. But with all the juggernauts that launched in 2023 between Baldur's Gate 3, Tears of the Kingdom, Spider-Man 2, seriously, this year was stacked. There's a good chance it slipped past you, and let's be real, mech games just appeal to a more niche audience than something like Elden Ring. Still, this game is a blast, and I really need to get back and replay it myself, as it's one of those titles that needs multiple playthroughs to experience the full story. Even just one playthrough though is packed with enough variety and intensity to leave a strong impression. And for the record, I say this as someone who doesn't usually care for mech games. So far, the only ones I've played and actually enjoyed are Titanfall 2 and this. Armored Core 6 offers wild build variety without being overwhelming, and with that signature FromSoft combat difficulty, it's just a fantastic experience. The indie darling of 2021. Honestly, it's probably too hyped for this list, but that hype is 100% deserved. It's a roguelike card game, but that's really just on the surface. There are layers on layers on layers here, and it's a joy slowly uncovering them as you figure more things out. I don't know about you, but I've been playing a lot of Blueprints this year, and if you have too, but somehow haven't played Inscryption, I implore you to fix that immediately. Like Blueprints, just when you think you've figured something out, the game explodes in scope and leaves you back at square one, completely clueless again. Yeah, I knew I could shoehorn something about Blueprints into this video. That's all I can say without spoiling anything though. It's really one of those games where the less you know going in, the better. With those out of the way, onto the list. This game was the inspiration for this video in the first place. I adore Neon White, and it always seems to creep back into my mind, begging to be played again. It's a first-person platformer with a focus on quick, speedrun-friendly levels. I bring up speedruns because that's really the core of this game. You'll rarely play a level just once. The game pushes you to replay them, rewarding your performance with medals and offering insights on how to go faster, like showing your ghost or revealing hidden shortcuts. If you're anything like me, you'll want to go for the ace medal on every level. Thankfully, the levels are short enough that retrying them feels like a small time investment, and honestly, it's addictive. During levels, you collect soul cards that act as weapons, but each one can also be discarded for a secondary effect, usually something movement based like a double jump or a dash. These abilities are often essential for reaching shortcuts or optimizing your route. Knowing when to use them for combat and when to discard them for movement is key to mastering each stage, alongside efficient movement and making sure you clear out every enemy. There's also collectible gifts that can be found in each level. These unlock extra dialogue and side quests with the other characters, which adds in some extra depth and helps flesh out the cast. The story is told through visual novel style cutscenes, and yeah, this is the part that gets the most criticism. Honestly, the story isn't super important for most of the game, but To be fair, it does start to get pretty engaging by the end. It leans into anime tropes and humor pretty hard, and while not all of it lands,
You will each receive a soul card containing a weapon befitting your past.
Whoa, badass.
it's got a personality that I can't bring myself to completely hate. Some of the one-liners they throw in are honestly pretty cringy, but that's part of the charm, I feel.
Didn't even break a sweat.
The game even seems aware that the cutscenes might grate on some people, given the pretty prominent fast-forward button in the top left corner of the screen. It's like the dev saying, yeah, we get it. It's here if you need it. The soundtrack is honestly so great though. It synergizes with that fast-paced gameplay perfectly and helps lock you into that all-important flow state the game thrives on. It all comes together to make seriously one of the best indie experiences I've ever had. If you've ever wanted to feel like a speedrunner without spending countless hours grinding, this game nails that feeling better than anything else I've ever played. Sleeping Dogs is one of those games that I feel like it didn't get the recognition it deserved when it launched, and 2 console generations later I still find myself hoping for a remake. Even without one though, this game is phenomenal. On the surface, it's a GTA-style open-world game, but it sets itself apart immediately with its Hong Kong setting and its focus on playing both sides of the law. You're Wei Shen, an undercover cop navigating the criminal underworld while trying to maintain your loyalty to the badge. And the game actually reflects that tension in its systems. Missions are scored on 2 fronts, Cop and Triad. Your Cop score drops if you wreck cars or hurt civilians, while your Triad score rewards you for fighting aggressively and brutally. Leveling up both gives access to separate skill trees, so you're constantly juggling your actions in the moment. Do you go full criminal or try to minimize harm and be a good officer? What really sells Sleeping Dogs for me is how varied and well executed the gameplay is across the board. The hand-to-hand combat is fluid and satisfying, clearly inspired by games like Arkham Asylum, but with a distinct martial arts flair. Foot chases are surprisingly dynamic and cinematic, and even the driving, which is often a weak point in games like this, feels fast and responsive. None of it feels tacked on or like filler, it's all just solid. It's a game that does a lot of things well and somehow still manages to feel overlooked. Even now, years later, it's absolutely worth revisiting or discovering for the first time. Thomas Was Alone is one of those indie games that arrived just before the big indie boom, but still managed to leave a lasting impression. On the surface, it's a simple puzzle platformer about colourful rectangles, but once you actually start playing, you realise it's doing something much more thoughtful. Each rectangle is a character with its own personality, perspective, and mechanical ability, and somehow, through a mix of tight level design and excellent narration, you start to care about them. The narration, by Danny Wallace, is what ties it all together.
Sure, he'd been able to piggyback his way to ever so slightly higher platforms, but where had that got him? Well, to ever so slightly higher platforms, which was sort of his point.
It gives voice to their hopes, their fears, and their relationships in a way that feels surprisingly human. The gameplay itself is fairly straightforward. You switch between different characters to solve environmental puzzles, using their individual strengths to progress. There's nothing overly complex or flashy about it, but it doesn't need to be. The simplicity gives the emotional beats more room to breathe. It's a quiet story about loneliness, friendship, and figuring out where you belong. And the fact that it achieves that using little more than shapes and a voiceover is kind of remarkable. Thomas Was Alone doesn't overstay its welcome, being only a few hours long, but what it sets out to do, it does nearly perfectly. If you missed it back when it first released, it's absolutely worth going back to. It's short, heartfelt, and a great reminder that you don't need a massive budget or high-end graphics to tell a story that sticks with people. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair is a surprisingly strong 2D platformer, and one that probably got overlooked by a lot of people, often because of the first game. And I get it, I actually liked the original Yooka-Laylee more than most, but for a lot of people, it didn't quite live up to the expectations of being a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie. That said, Impossible Lair is a completely different experience, and a significant step up in terms of overall design and polish. It's a 2D platformer much more in line with Donkey Kong Country, or the even more recent Donkey Kong Country Returns games like Tropical Freeze. And honestly, it holds up surprisingly well in that comparison. The level design is smart, the controls are responsive, and there's a solid variety in the environments and the challenges. It's not just aping nostalgia, it's genuinely well executed. One of the more clever design choices is that each level has 2 modes. You'll complete the level once, but then doing something in the overworld, like flooding the area or freezing it, transforms the level into a new version. It's a really smart way to reuse space while keeping the game fresh, and it makes exploring the overworld feel meaningful rather than just decorative. The core hook is the Impossible Lair itself, a long, brutally difficult final level that you can attempt at any time, right from the start. If you're good enough, you can beat the entire game with 0 upgrades, which is technically possible, but not exactly recommended. The main goal is to rescue members of the battalion, each of whom gives you an extra hit for that final level. The more you collect, the more survivable the impossible lair becomes, which gives the game a nice balance between open structure and escalating challenge. There's also a clever tonic system that lets you customize the game's difficulty. Some tonics make the game harder and reward you with a higher quill multiplier, while others make things easier at the cost of earning fewer quills. And there are a bunch of cosmetic ones too, purely for fun, which adds a bit of personality to the whole system. It's not incredibly deep, but it's a nice extra layer that lets you tailor your experience without breaking the flow of the game. It's easy to write this one off because of the baggage of the first game, but that would be a mistake. The impossible lair stands on its own as a sharp, well-crafted platformer, and it deserves more attention than it got. Ancestors: The Humankind Odyssey is probably one of the most interesting games I've played in years, and also one of the most stubborn. Made by one of the creators behind Assassin's Creed, this isn't your typical open world game. You start as a scared, not very intimidating little hominid somewhere deep in prehistoric Africa, trying not to die long enough to evolve into something vaguely resembling a human. The premise is genuinely fascinating. You don't just play as a monkey, you think like one. Very little is explained at first, and a lot of frustration in the early hours comes from how underdeveloped your character actually is. You might know that you can use a stick as a weapon, but your little proto-human doesn't. Not until you force it to make the necessary neurological connections and learn for itself. The result is a game that often feels unintuitive, but in a way that kinda makes sense given the context. There's this real learning curve here, and it won't be for everyone, but once it starts to click, it becomes oddly compelling. There's a genuine sense of discovery in experimenting with the systems and figuring out how to pass knowledge onto your offspring, strengthen your lineage, and eventually leap forward in evolutionary time. It's a survival game, but one with an unusually long view, and a willingness to let you fail, often. It's the kind of game I really respect. It takes risks, it experiments, it doesn't hold your hand, and because of that, it landed with me in a big way. There's something genuinely satisfying about slowly mastering its systems and seeing your tribe evolve because of what you taught them. It taps into that reject humanity, return to monkey part of the brain in the best way. It's not flawless, but it's memorable, and sometimes that matters more. If you're even slightly curious, it's worth giving it a shot. It might just surprise you. Mark of the Ninja might be one of the closest things we have to a perfect stealth game. It's side-scrolling, which might sound limiting at first, but the way it's designed makes stealth feel more deliberate and focused than a lot of 3D games. It strips things down to what actually matters: line of sight, sound, shadows, and timing. What makes it so satisfying is how powerful you feel while staying hidden. From the shadows, you can take out guards silently, set traps, and completely control the flow of a level. But if you're spotted, you're in trouble. You don't get to just turn into an action hero and fight your way out. The only real option is to retreat, hide, and reset. That risk-reward balance gives every decision weight, and it forces you to engage with the stealth mechanics properly. There's a good amount of variety here too. You get access to different ninja tools such as smoke bombs or noisemakers, and levels often have optional goals that reward creative or non-lethal play. You can go full predator, picking off enemies one by one, or try to ghost through a level without being seen. The tools support both approaches without forcing you into one style. Visually, it's clean and stylized, and that clarity really helps sell the stealth. You always know where you're hidden and what enemies can see or hear. It's one of those games where everything just clicks. The mechanics are strong, the feedback is immediate, and the challenge ramps up at a steady, satisfying pace. It's a fantastic game, plain and simple. If you have even a passing interest in stealth mechanics, Mark of the Ninja is essential. There's very little else that nails the genre this confidently. The Swindle is one of those games that constantly forces you to ask yourself, should I push my luck or get out now? You play as a squishy little thief sneaking into procedurally generated buildings, trying to steal as much money as possible before the alarm inevitably goes off, and the police show up to ruin your hard work. And trust me, you die fast in this game. One slip up and you're done. It's tense in the best way. There's this constant push and pull between greed and survival. Every time you grab a few credits, you start thinking, I could probably grab just one more stack. But that's how you get caught. It's that just one more mentality that gets you killed. And when you die, you lose that thief permanently, as well as any money that they collected. That money is important too, as you need to invest in permanent upgrades, making it easier to go bigger next time. The game has a nice difficulty curve baked into its structure. You start off in low income areas with weak security and tiny payoffs, but as you unlock access to wealthier districts, the money gets better, and so does the security. By the end, you're up against drones, turrets, and increasingly complex layouts that demand precision and planning. On top of all of that, there's this global countdown ticking down. You've got a fixed number of in-game days before the game ends, and the pressure from that deadline is real. It subtly encourages you to take bigger risks than you probably should. At some point you'll be looking at the upgrade costs and your remaining days and realize, if I don't start getting bold, I'm not going to make it. It's stress-inducing in a really compelling way. If I had to nitpick, the platforming feels weird. Your character's movement has this slightly off-feeling momentum to it that doesn't feel as tight as something like Celeste or Mario. But weirdly, that kind of works in its favour. If the controls were too precise, you'd probably never die, and that ever-present clumsiness ends up being part of the challenge. It makes your successes feel hard-earned, and failures feel like it was just barely avoidable. It's a scrappy, underplayed little gem, and if you enjoy roguelikes or stealth games with high stakes and smart progression, the Swindle is absolutely worth a shot. This is The Police is a strategy game with a heavy dose of noir. You play as Jack Boyd, a police chief counting down the days to retirement while navigating a city rotting from the inside out. Corruption is everywhere. City Hall pulls your strings, the mafia wants favours, and your officers, some of them are barely holding it together. The game has this slow, deliberate pace that fits the tone perfectly. Each day begins with you picking a jazz or classical record to spin while you work, and it's such a nice touch. It doesn't do anything mechanically, but it grounds you in the mood of the game, like you're really showing up for another grim shift. The management side of things goes deep. You assign officers to crimes, juggle shift rotations, and try to keep your staff from turning on you. Sometimes they'll ask for a day off for understandable reasons. Other times, it's because they're too tired from watching TV all night. You'll have people turn up drunk or pull risky moves that get others killed. They level up with each job, and that makes it all the more painful when you're forced to fire a trusted officer to keep the mayor happy or lose someone in the field. A big part of the gameplay involves using the detectives to solve crimes. You'll read witness statements and piece together what actually happened, laying out a sequence of events like a puzzle. If you get it right, you can send your officers to arrest the suspect. You can even take down entire crime rings by following the trail up to the leader. It's satisfying in a way that slow burn games rarely are. The cutscenes play out in a minimalist, stylized comic panel format, grim, bleak, and perfect for the story it's telling. You're constantly faced with uncomfortable decisions. Bend the law to stay afloat, or try to keep your integrity intact and risk everything. The game knows there's rarely a clean answer, and it forces you to sit with that. If I have one complaint, it's that the game does run a little long. The campaign stretches over 180 in-game days, and while I really enjoyed my time with it, the management loop does start to feel repetitive towards the end. I think it could have been trimmed a bit without losing anything important. And while it doesn't quite hit the same gut punch moral weight as something like Papers, Please, it's a little toothless by comparison, it still does a decent job of scratching that same itch. If you're after a slow burn strategy game that blends management, storytelling, and moral compromise, This is The Police is absolutely worth your time. Into the Breach is a turn-based tactics game that approaches combat more like a puzzle than a traditional strategy title. Each level shows you exactly what the enemy is going to do before they do it, so it's not about reacting to random events, but about solving a problem as effectively as possible. The challenge comes from figuring out how to disrupt or redirect enemy actions without taking unnecessary damage to your units or to the city you're trying to protect. There are often surprisingly creative solutions. You can push enemies into each other's line of fire, block emerging threats by standing on spawn points, or set up chain reactions that eliminate multiple enemies at once. It's satisfying in a quiet, calculated way. You're rarely winning by brute force, you're winning by being one step ahead. Your pilots gain experience over time, which unlocks new bonuses and makes them more effective. That alone incentivizes smarter play. It's easy to rely on your strongest mech, but if you overuse one pilot, the rest of your squad ends up underdeveloped. And if your star pilot dies, you're left with a noticeable gap in capability. It's a light form of character progression, but it does affect how you approach each mission. Structurally, the game gives you 4 islands to tackle, but you only need to complete 2 before you can attempt the final mission. Each island and the final level scale with your progress, which gives you some interesting decisions, whether to play it safe and build strength gradually, or go for a riskier but potentially quicker run. The sci-fi framing helps tie the mechanics together nicely. The idea of jumping across timelines to stop the Vec gives context to the roguelike structure, and helps justify the ability to carry pilot progress between runs. It's a clean way of reinforcing replayability, without having to over-explain the system. It's not a loud game, and it doesn't demand long sessions, but it's the kind of strategy game that rewards careful thinking and small optimizations. If you're looking for something thoughtful and efficient, Into the Breach delivers that experience with very little wasted time. Okay, so I might be cheating a little bit with this one. Dungeon Keeper isn't just some underappreciated gem that I want more people to try. It's my favorite game of all time. But hey, my list, I make the rules. Dungeon Keeper flips the classic fantasy script on its head. Instead of being the shining hero delving into dungeons, you are the dungeon. You're the malevolent force running the show, building traps, slapping imps, and sending bile demons and warlocks to squash those do-gooder knights and fairies who think they can purify your evil lair. It's a gleeful reversal of the usual roles, and the game leans hard into that tone with a rich layer of dark humour that still holds up. It's a real-time strategy game, but one that I've always found surprisingly approachable, even if you're not deep into the genre. You're managing resources, expanding your dungeon, and preparing for waves of invading heroes, but the mechanics are simple enough that it never feels overwhelming, at least until your spider decides to take a bite out of one of your flies. And while Dungeon Keeper is obviously an older title now, the fan-made Keeper Effects project breathes new life into it. It modernizes the controls, fixes countless issues, and even adds new campaigns, all while staying true to the original's charm. You do still need the original game files to play it, but honestly, if you're even remotely intrigued, Keeper Effects is the way to experience it today. It's seriously impressive how passionate the fanbase is nearly 30 years on. I get that this one might not be for everyone. It's a little clunky by modern standards, and it does come from that very specific mid-90s PC era, but if you're at all curious what it's like to be a villain, complete with evil laughter, torture chamber, and maybe one too many exploding chickens, this game is an all-timer. So that's the list. Thank you so much for watching. If you've played any of these games, let me know what you thought of them in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe, it really does help out. This video was actually made for a university assignment, and I had a lot of fun putting it together. Like with every video I make, I learned a lot during the process, and I'm always looking to keep improving and make my content more engaging. I'm actually in my final year of uni right now, on track to finish around October, so uploads this year have been pretty inconsistent. Thanks for bearing with me. To celebrate the mid-trimester break, I'm planning to stream a hardcore Mario Mod Nuzlocke on Twitch, starting Saturday the 14th. I know it's not exactly backlog related content, but if that does sound interesting to you, I'll post some proper details on time zones and stuff closer to then, so keep an eye out. Thanks again, and as always, best of luck with getting through your own gaming backlog.